All right, good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the Holland Land Office Museum for our guest speaker series. Thank you for all coming out, even though the Bills will be on in a little bit. Go Bills.
Where's the TV?
At your house.
I'll give you live updates. How about that? So this is our guest speaker series. We've been doing this since 2017, and we do now 2 to 3 a month. So it's been a growing program. Thank you to Tompkins Community Bank and Batavia Rotary Club for helping sponsor it for this year. So we're very happy to have Dr. Randy John with us tonight from Salamanca, so he made the long trek out here. But he's going to talk about the Seneca in the Revolutionary War. And we have a special gift for everybody in the audience tonight. If you so choose, we have a copy of his book available for everybody to take home. So stop up and see us before you leave if you'd like a copy, and we'll make sure you get it. Take it away, sir.
Ja sam natonless. Now I go. What I just said to you is my name is Neptunlace. That's my Seneca name, my clan. I'm a turtle clan. I'm from the Allegany territory. Then I said, it's a greeting. Thankful that you are well. That's one of our common greetings we start. We start our presentations with when we talk to people, introduce ideas of our history. And thank you for coming out. This is going to be an important event tonight, but it starts later when the Bills play. So, I'm gonna how much time do I have, sir?
1 hour.
1 hour? Okay, I'll try not to go over that.
Okay, we'll take it.
Well,
You'll be here by yourself.
All right. Keep it down.
well, I brought some work to do, so I'm always working on a book project. All right, so you do have a copy of the book. I published it last year, and I put an errata in there because I know the mother of 2 artists in Tonawanda, and they're excellent artists, and somehow I was told, or I got the wrong name for the wrong brother. So I corrected that with the errata sheet. I did include a sheet of some of the other books that I published, and I do own my own company. I publish books for other people. They're not all Seneca history, but I've done that for a while, so it's kind of been my third calling in life. So, I haven't presented in 10 years. Had some health problems over the years, and I'm good now. I'm doing great. So it's fun to be back here and do this. So I'll try not to take too long. I'm going to talk about the Seneca version of the American history. Kind of get to that. It's kind of unique because in the American Revolution, most of the information we see here, even myself, is something that's been written by a non-Indian. So we're trying to figure out history based on other people's views. And sometimes, our historiography, those views are not always clear. We have some issues out there that are debated. I might address a few of them. I may not answer that completely, but there's some debated issues. So in the book, I have a list of some of the battles that involve the Allegany. Allegany means native people in Seneca. So, and Haudenosaunee is what people call the Six Nations, Iroquois. So, if I use those terms, remind me, ask me again, I'll share that with you. So I have a couple tables in there that list the battles that occurred or the events that occurred in the war, in the conflict. In the original beginning of the American Revolution, when the colonists revolted against Great Britain, Haudenosaunee had a policy of neutrality. They weren't interested in fighting with the colonists. They weren't interested in being in a war with the British. They had a changing way of life. Their life has been affected for centuries with interaction with Europeans that came over to what we call Turtle Island or North America. So, the world had changed for them. So they knew that entering the American Revolution would be a very difficult thing for their society. for their way of life. And they knew they didn't want to be in the middle of a fight between two European groups. So for a while, they tried to stay out of the war. On the other hand, natives have been instrumental in the wars that had occurred in North America over certain things, such as the Beaver Belt War and acquisition of land and everything else that had a capitalist value, something that was brought over from Europe. So they understood what was at risk. The American Revolution begins in 1775. The Haudenosaunee leaders are against involvement. They're not interested in fighting the British or the colonists. The Senecas are kind of split in terms of their associations because we were in different areas. So in the part that you're most familiar with, we were dealing with the British. Out in Ohio, we had native groups out there. We had people that moved out there over time, and we were dealing with French. So in the prior war, maybe the First World War, the French and Indian War, we had Senecas fighting for the French. We had Senecas fighting for the British. You know, a brother versus a brother kind of thing. So it's not a simple, the Senecas supported the British all through the American Revolution. It's, you know, it's more complicated than that. So that creates internal issues for the Haudenosaunee. Just some background on what it'd be like to be a Seneca leader, I guess, in this time. You know, the economy had changed for natives. You know, we used to have corn, beans, and squash, and we used to make our own food like other, you know, traditional people throughout the world. After time with Europeans, things altered. So some of those patterns changed. So then we started trading. We traded for things, items, tools, food. Then money became introduced to a certain degree, or bartering to begin with beforehand. So our world changed. So now we have a relationship with the British. Same time, you know, I'm sure you're familiar with the missionaries that came over. Missionaries were sent out to indigenous people throughout the world, and their focus was to Christianize in, you know, in their way to, they believe in a morally positive way to make lives better for indigenous people in their mindset, somewhat ethnocentrically, but in their mindset. So we have business people out there, we have traders out there, we have missionaries out there. Senecas were originally not so fond of the missionaries. Again, you know the topography. We are farthest west, keepers of the western door. So we were more isolated. We had less involvement. You know, the Mohawks on the east, keepers of the eastern door, tremendous involvement. Highly British. Joseph Brantley, you know, they're long had relations, intermarriage, and so on. So when you talk about the Haudenosaunee, there's no one easy way of saying the Haudenosaunee supported this or they rejected this, because it was a bit more complex. And I won't be able to answer every avenue of that tonight, but I can talk about the Senecas mostly. In the book, actually, I gave you a page of Seneca words that are in the book. So you read the book, make a photocopy of that, so you have it up, because you won't remember them. Who is that? Who is that? So you can follow it along. The Americans and the British started having councils with the Haudenosaunee, including the Senecas. And it was recruitment. Come fight with us. We would like your warriors. We would like your help. And if you can imagine that the numbers were significant, whoever were to recruit the Haudenosaunee probably had a better advantage in this conflict between the colonists and Great Britain. as I said, neutrality was the official policy. However, 1775, a group of Cayuga, Mohawk, and Seneca go with the British officers to fight against the colonists in Canada. I guess we call them rogue warriors. They're not following the policy of the leaders. Somehow, some way, they were convinced. And you have to remember that these trading forts, if you think about them, they're more than just a place like a store. It's not like a 7-Eleven where you go get food, whatever you need, right? It's a military post. So, French, till they were eliminated, British had their posts. So they developed relationships. And when you develop relationships, you develop loyalties. I'd suggest it's probably not totally economically determined that, gee, I better fight with the British so I can keep trading with them. But you know what? A good part of it was that. And when it comes down to the end, that is one of the major factors that comes into helping the Senecas decide to join the war on the side of the British. So, we got the rogue warriors in 1775. They go out, the battle's pretty much a stalemate. And the book has a lot more detail in here, you know, it has a lot of detail. And I'm not going to try and share all of that tonight. What a lot of people don't, yes sir?
Were they instrumental in Fort Niagara and Erie?
Fort Niagara, yes. So, you know, originally Fort Niagara was French territory, right?
Okay.
And Seneca land.
Yes.
And so, actually the Senecas intermarried with the French, and we had some French leaders. And the actual original idea of the Pontiac's Rebellion was a Seneca idea. The Western Confederacy actually rejected it earlier, not the topic of tonight, but you know, so one of those original leaders was the son of a Seneca woman and one of the French leaders. So there's a long history of, again, interaction, trading, living together. So some of these leaders didn't just come into town and let's trade and head out. One great leader moved in and lived with the Senecas. And then he had children. And he sent his young children to live with the Senecas. So it was quite a commitment. And then also there were children with Seneca women and these officers. So, you know, it's kind of a holistic kind of world, if you think about it, you know. I mean, I always envision, like I drove here, you know, 2 hours and 20 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. I'm thinking, man, my ancestors walked here. I'm thinking, how long is it going to take me? No, not anymore. I have trouble walking the golf course anymore. Let alone walking to Batavia. Anyway, so out in Ohio land, we had Senecas that moved out there and other Haudenosaunee. So they're in a different territory. The French are more prominent, still kind of around there. So they certainly were not pro-British. That doesn't mean that they're pro-colonists. Because what's happening out there? What's happening out in the highlands? Why are Haudenosaunee out there anyways? What happened? We have our traditional lands here. Well, what's happening is Europeans are coming in. They're encroaching on land. Legally, illegally, whatever you want to talk about there in terms of that perspective, but pressure. So then all of a sudden, what happens to the hunting grounds? What happens to the fish and the game? Now you have a lot more people trying to rely on that just to subsist if you're taking care of yourself, right? If you're not going to a store and buying things. So, younger people did move out to the Ohio area. It was called the Old Northwest back then, by the way. And they were not friendly. Well, they were friendly with colonists until colonists weren't friendly with them. Can I say that? Can you understand that?
You got it.
Because I'm not, every colonist wasn't a bad person. Every Seneca warrior wasn't a bad person, but I'm sure we had some bad people, and I'm sure there's some colonials that were bad people, and some of those incidents did happen, and they did cause some of the problems all the way up to the 1794 Treaty of Peace, because there were some murders out in Ohio and that sort of thing. But I just want you to understand this, Senecas are kind of different communities of Senecas, okay? So I try not to make an overall generalization that covers every community.
There's encroachment.
Encroachment, absolutely, absolutely. So, you know, you have all the players, and we had the Dutch first, right? And they had the French, and then the British, and the colonists, you know, got rid of the French mostly, right? And then the Americans got rid of the British, but you know the British didn't leave until like 1812 or so. I'm not really good at 1812. Somebody here was telling me earlier about that. Maybe they can help me out here. But the British were still hanging around with all these forts they were supposed to leave. The American government wasn't that powerful, so they were worried, again, about natives, who they were going to ally with. But again, I'm jumping way ahead. Apologies here. So when George Washington comes as an officer out to the Ohio, he's assigned, and one of his first assignments to go out and to evict the French at one of their forts. And he meets this young warrior, Guy Soto. He's a Seneca. He becomes one of the great leaders of the Ohio area. But they're both young, and you know George Washington started the French and Indian War, right? You know that incident, if you haven't read George Washington was involved in a little thing, and he started, you could say he did something significant to start the French and Indian War. Okay? He had some Seneca allies, and in that episode, you know, they kind of abandoned him in the end because they had kind of a rough plan. They weren't used to fighting out in the woods, and you know, the traditional European lineup and that sort of stuff didn't work out all that well. So these people threw, I'll get to you one second.
Talk a little bit louder because when your voice goes down and you can't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Is this better if I move this up closer?
It's
Move this up closer, baby. Sorry. All right. How's that? That sound better?
yeah.
Yes.
Apologies. So, a young George Washington, a young Guy Soto, future leaders, American Revolution. Guy Soto, he is the Haudenosaunee representative in the Ohio area. You know who George Washington is, what it becomes, what it ends up being in the American Revolution. So this is his first trip out there. The guy named the Young Warrior goes with him, catches their food. And you go to the French don't leave, but we're not doing the French and Indian War tonight. You know, we have a Bills game to keep going to. So. Even Red Jacket, I see there's a Red Jacket thing up here in the museum. Red Jacket was involved in some of the negotiations. You know, he went out. Fort Pitt was a big area. Fort Pitt was kind of the central area. Again, used to be French, became British, became American, right? Those central areas all become those hubs for economy, politics, military, whatever you want to call it. So they travel there, and you think about, remember, Red Jacket, you know, he's in the Geneseo area. So he, you know, for best I know, we didn't have horses traveling all the way, okay? Or walking. So he's going from Geneseo area to Pittsburgh, right? I'm just amazed that all the world, not just natives, all the world were so mobile, in great shape. The Patriots had problems recruiting Haudenosaunee. They didn't have the money. So this accommodation that occurred, you know, Oklahoma people moving to needing guns, gunpowder, flour, other things. Well, that's expensive stuff, right? Clothes. And Americans didn't have as much money as the British. There was a time the French had a good advantage too because they had more money than the British. But again, they're phased out. So this is one thing against the colonists in trying to recruit Haudenosaunee. They didn't have enough for the, I put that right here in the book, guns, ammunition, axes, hoes, kettles, repair work, so on. In a book by Barbara Graymont, famous book, you should look it up, look in the appendix, it's fun to read. She makes a statement that I like to read, it kind of helps us understand. It says, these relations I'm talking about between Okwayomwe and the colonists. Those who live closest to the Indian territories and those who have more reaching responsibilities than their own self-interest or the interests of their local communities frequently looked upon Indian tribes from an entirely different perspective from that of the British. Many of the colonial leaders and border settlers considered the Indian to be an inconvenient impediment in the way of further white advancement, manifest destiny, if you will. A creature to be appeased only when absolutely necessary, to be exploited always, and to be divested of his land whenever feasible. You know, we're all aware of that. We spend any time reading about the history of land changes and so on. So that's what's at stake, you know. Everything's at stake. When you talk about land, it's not just land. You know, it's the infrastructure, it's your economic infrastructure, because land brings your fish, your water, your trees, your game, your place to live, so on. Your protection, you know. We lived on hills. We didn't live by the rivers. We didn't get flooded out, you know. Up on the hills, you can, you know, see the enemy coming, right? Strategic. Again, the missionaries at this time are quite significant. By now, they're in all the nations, and there's Christianized Okwayomwe as well. And you'll find that some of the Christianized Okwayomwe are more supportive of colonial entities. And we find in the end, you know, the Tuscaroras and Oneidas supported colonists. Well, Samuel Kirkland, the missionary, very famous missionary, spent a lot of time. In fact, he came out to the Seneca land first in 1768, something like that, and didn't stay long because I guess we were hostile. My ancestors were quite hostile. Remember, they're farther west, less supportive, less interaction, you know, very superstitious about things. Somebody got sick and somebody, the chief accused they wanted to kill him because it was him, you know, and then this chief saved him and he said, come out of here. Can't blame him, right? But he had more reception with the Oneidas, and you know that his support at Oneida territories helped with support for the colonists. And the Tuscaroras, you know, the younger brothers in the Oneida, they as well joined with the Americans. Although, you know, you'll see in my book a couple examples where there are some Oneidas and Cayugas, or Oneidas Tuscaroras who actually were fought with the British in an event. So not as straightforward as it would like to be. All right, I have a couple more quotes I'd like to share with you. I'll just do one to tell you about the neutrality. So I was going to try to think about how the leaders were in the past. Colonial and Okwayomwe. So this is Guy Soto. This is the guy I was telling you about. He's now a greater leader than he was when he was a hunter guiding George Washington in 1753, 54, mid-50s. Talking about recruitment to the British are recruiting him and Seneca's Ohio area to be part of the war effort. It is 3 nights since you told me the Americans with whom you are at war are all mad, foolish, crazy, full of deceit, and that their intentions towards us are bad. I will now tell you that you are mad, foolish, crazy, and deceitful. For you think we are fools and advise us to do what is not in our interests. The Americans, on the contrary, are the wise people, so far as they have yet to speak. For what they advise us is to stay out of their quarrel with you. But you want us to assist you, which we cannot do. For suppose the Americans conquer you, what would they then say to us? I tell you, brother, you are foolish. We will not allow you to pluck up the tree of peace, nor raise the hatchet. We are strong and able to do it ourselves when we are hurt. So, you don't hear this in American history in 8th grade or anything like that. So it's kind of fun to see some of this stuff. And you'll see in the list of books there's a book called the Draper Manuscripts. The Draper Manuscripts is the Seneca version of the American Revolution. It's not the only thing they talk about, but Governor Blacksnake is interviewed in his old years, and it's transcribed by the Wisconsin Historical Society historian. And actually, I convinced my boss, the director of the museum, to transcribe it about 10, 15 years ago. And so it's been transcribed before, but I said, we need a transcription of this, because this is the closest thing we get to a first-person account of what's going on. So it's really a second-person account, it's him. But you'll see that in the references. So a lot of the stuff that I talk about does come out of here. Wasting time. So I enjoyed sharing the other facts that are out there. They all fit in at different times in my life, writing some of the other stuff too. So it's hard for me to not include it so you can see the whole picture, get that puzzle together. Another leader from the Genesee area that we know of is Old Smoke, and he is the greatest leader of the Senecas throughout the American Revolution. They have nice descriptions of him. Whoever was writing this, he was pretty tall, over 6 feet, large in size, and a commanding figure, respected by all. So when neighboring writers are describing a person like that, you have to feel that at least it has a pretty good level of truth for them. So Old Smoke he's quite significant. Corn Planter is another younger leader, and he actually was not in favor of the revolution quite up to the end. He was actually quite interested in joining the Ohio Confederacy and continuing warfare against the Americans in the early 1790s, right up to almost the beginning of the Pickering Treaty, Treaty Canandaigua, in November 1794. And he actually, when we get to the Broadhead campaign, I'll try to make sure I get there for you. His land and his area, which was very well developed, is burnt to the ground, just like the Genesee Valleys. Part of the plan, the Sullivan plan, part of the Sullivan plan. And his nephew is Blacksnake. This is the person who interviewed in his old age to hear the story, Governor Blacksnake. Interestingly, these leaders, in the 1790s, they're going to Philadelphia, and they're meeting with George Washington. They're meeting with Congress. They're treated as sovereign equals politically. They're respected. The power and influence of the Haudenosaunee has a different level. Back then, it was still quite prominent. And there was actually conflict between other Ohlone nations with the Haudenosaunee. I'd like to say we all loved each other as brothers and sisters, but I'm going to tell you, we probably didn't. So, and there was differentiation on the support of the colonists as well. So, the Ohio Confederacy fought all the way to 1795 against the Americans. So, we had the fate. We're, kind of in the middle of that. Finally, we get to peace in 1794. We're also dealing with other nations. And once Americans win, they're asking us to go out there and keep them from, rebelling. Remember, the American government doesn't have all that much money to have weapons and soldiers to have defense and protect themselves. So, and the British are still hanging out there in all those forts trying to get their way back in, right? The British haven't given up on the whole thing. Thing I usually talk about is, we see on TV Indians scalping Americans, along if I can use the word stereotype, there's a nice article out there that kind of debunks the origin of scalping. And the origin of scalping is, it's a terrible thing. Let me just say that, okay? It's a terrible thing. Indians weren't the only person that did it in warfare. Well, it didn't just start the American Revolution, but in the American Revolution, the British offered $50 in money or goods for any colonist scalp. So, if you're thinking like it is on TV, it's it's part of the celebration of fighting and winning a war. It's about money, okay? It's turning people into mercenaries, isn't it? Doesn't it sound like mercenaries? $50 in the 1700, isn't that a lot of money? I always had to get online and do a scale and find out what it's worth, because I can't figure it out myself.
Big bucks.
Yeah. And it's the other way around as well. I'm sure if you had an Indian scalp, you might be making some money as well from another entity, right?
Yeah, different level.
Yeah.
Of course, from children to women to whether it's blonde hair, black hair, or whatever, adult, male, big bucks,
Yeah. Officers.
they were considered warrior.
Thank you. So when we get to the point where the Haudenosaunee decide to come into the war, first person to accept the war belt is Joseph Brand, of course, Mohawks, right? Strong British allies for a long time. His sister Mary's the leader, the military leader of the area, right? So they're in cahoots. I mean, they're family, right? They're family. His brother-in-law. Seneca's Old Smoke is powerful, and he signs second. Oneidas and Tuscaroras were the last two. This particular one to accept the British war belt. I included that because it's just neat, because we all know Oneidas in general and Tuscaroras were with the colonists, but there were some there that joined in. All right, I better move up to some of the battles because we got football games. These details are in the book that you're getting. Yes?
I did the $50 translation.
Yes.
And it's about $2,000.
$2,000. Wow. That's a lot today, isn't it? I can tell you, I'm not getting $2,000 today for this time.
Go out and get scalps.
They still long hair for a while. They offer it up. All right, let's move to the big battle. Probably the bloodiest battle that involved the Haudenosaunee and the Americans and the British, of course, is Oriskany, Fort Stanwix, near Fort Stanwix. That is the bloodiest battle, at least with natives, in terms of the American Revolution. And the Senecas were part of that. There's actually two stories out there that I've found. Don't know if I have the full answer, but one story is that the Senecas didn't want to fight, and they were guilted in by the Mohawks to come fight in the battle. The other story that's written in some sources is that they said, "Look, just come with us, see the battle. We're gonna whoop those colonists, right? Come watch the victory." And somehow, they had to fight. They got in the mix of it and the fighting. Don't know what the truth is, but several books say several things. And put that out there for you to think about, maybe to research it or enjoy trying to find the answer to that. But Oriskany, the British say that the Senecas lost 17 people and 16 were wounded. Governor Blacksnake, in his version, said 30 Senecas were killed and 5 chiefs. So, the numbers, the stories are always a little different. The American version and Blacksnake's version. And remember, Blacksnake's being interpreted. He speaks Seneca, right? So his neighbor is interpreting for this historian from Wisconsin. So, and then books get sent places, and people make changes to those books. You know, I've had articles that I've sent in for publication and they want me to say this. They didn't like the way I said that. That's a reality, so again, always just keep that in the back of your mind. If you look at page, you don't have to look, when you get to page 17, I have a list of the Haudenosaunee battles. Kind of list them out. I kind of go through this. It's, you know, if you're having trouble sleeping, start reading this because I give you all the details. Like, fine, I just kind of repeat it so it's there. It's found in one place, and you have it at your leisure. I have another table later on some of the other battles. Understand that it was less person-to-person fighting. There were attacks, there were raids, there were atrocious killings and things like that. Both sides, both ways, it happens, right? But a lot of it, the Sullivan campaign it's not, it's going to a community and destroying it. So, in terms of these, I'm not going to go through all of these, we can probably go right to Newtown and Geneseo. But when we get to the end of the Revolution, the Sullivan campaign is out there. George Washington decides that once the Indians come in with the British and they made some raids at communities, people were killed and communities were destroyed, and it wasn't going well for a while, just a little while, just for the colonists. He said, we got to have a plan. This plan is to make sure that we take out the Haudenosaunee, get them out of the picture, however. So his plan is pretty simple. I'm summarizing it. It's spelled out in the book, so you have the book. Burn their land, burn their food, burn their houses. He didn't really come out and say, kill them. I guess this is a kind of a middle level of genocide. If you lose your house, you lose your ability to feed yourself, you lose everything you own, you lose the ability to protect yourself. That was genocide, but it's awful hard to live, right? It's awful hard to live. But this is warfare, right? So now George Washington, creates the Sullivan campaign. And the Sullivan campaign is all planned. There's three particular groups of leaders: Clinton, Bradhead, and Sullivan. The governor's brother. Anyways, they look at the Genesee Valley. All the communities there, a lot of communities, and not just the Senecas, it's the Haudenosaunee, but primarily Senecas. It's not all of them, but it's, so this is not just a war against the Senecas, but primarily it's part of that. It's based on the higher ownership of land. It's as simple as that, the infrastructure, the ownership of land. It becomes a different kind of war when it becomes treaties, when you get to Joseph Ellicott, you get to this building, and you get to the plans of, acquiring Seneca land. So it's, it's still the same thing that people compete for economic organization, if I could say it that way. It's basic stuff. So when we get to the end of Newtown is a battle that did occur. Red Jacket is at Newtown, but there's some, in Black Snake's version, he shares some of the stories of what happened. And Red Jacket was a great orator. He wasn't a chief, he was a sub-chief, and he represented people. And he was a great politician, absolutely. Yeah, you know the story of Calculate. He wasn't a great warrior, didn't like fighting, at least at some point. I know early in his career he fled one battle. He fled at Newtown. But he didn't just run away and go home. He stuck around and kind of later got involved with trying to negotiate a peace treaty outside of the purview of the leaders of the Haudenosaunee, which he probably shouldn't have done, caused some problems. Joseph Brant probably really wanted to have somebody kill him. I don't want to say that I know that for sure, but I'm kind of thinking about the way it was back then. They probably didn't like each other too well. So Red Jacket is in the scene, and he is a significant person. And, some of that comes out, so it's kind of fun reading the Black Snake version. By the time they get to Geneseo, that's the big community, right? About 2 soldiers who were massacred that we hear about. Boyd and Parker. So, you know, it's happened both sides. It's an awful thing. When we get to that stage, we're getting to the end of the American Revolution, the involvement of the Haudenosaunee. They're losing lives, and let's think about one more thing that's happening. Okay, the pressure's there, we have to decide, we have to go one way or the other, we can't be neutral anymore, right? We know both of them are coming after our land. We know we're at risk for that. So we gotta pick a side. If you're a pragmatic politician, you're picking the side, you want to survive for your people. You want your people to be able to survive. So you might pick the right side or the wrong side. But what else is happening? The warriors are gone from the community. They're not hungry. The women are not able to continue to do all the farming and keep the traditional economic production up. Of a whole year of just warfare. Because sometimes women travel in all these events that are going on. So now, a greater dependence on trading with someone, just for food, for sustenance, right? Basic everyday needs, clothing. You know, we went from bone arrows to getting deer to rifles, right? As far back as the 1600s, right? When the Dutch came, they brought rifles, and they were part of the Beaver Wars. So that was happening. So now, late in the Revolution, even after these 2 major losses, now the Haudenosaunee faced a situation where they had to continue warfare to try and subsist without British support. Not killing a colonist, but stealing their livestock so they could eat. You see the stories in some of these where the leaders, Old Smoke was old. I mean, that was his name, but he was actually old, right? They ate Old Smoke's horse just to feed because of the starvation. And you know, the colonists, at the end of the Sullivan campaign, the Broad Day campaign, they had shoes and they were tattered and they were barely dressed, and you know, they were in bad shape too. It wasn't just the Indians were in bad shape. Everybody's in bad shape in that warfare. Warfare is it's no great experience. So I have a lot of stuff here that I could have shared, which was fun. So I'm going to go to the end because I'm getting close to kickoff time. So let's go to where we are now. Right now we're at the revolution is over basically for warfare with the British or with the colonists. Let's see. Remind me of the year when peace is arranged. 1783, Americans, 1783, Americans and British make peace.
Something like that.
Yeah, 1780. So, when they make this peace agreement, there is no inclusion of natives, only people. Now, there was an attempt to negotiate with the Senecas, and it was rejected because, the colonists said, we want your land, you get out. I don't know what they said. It was probably something of that nature, okay? It wasn't, clearly that's part of the negotiation because, the view of them as a loser and that sort of stuff in the battle. But anyways, Senecas continued for a year and a half anyways, after 1779, to attack communities in Pennsylvania. Because of the Revolution, no. Because of past involvement in conflicts, yes. To get resources to survive, yes. The British made promises of money, supplies, to be our ally. Said, we'll take care of you. We're going to win. You're going to have more money than you want. You're going to have all these supplies you're going to need. Life will be good. It didn't go that way, and the British made their peace. Didn't include, well, however it happened. One'Ohiomo weren't included. in that peace. So the colonists didn't look too favorably now, because now you got 4 of the 6 nations, who fought against them, were involved in raids that families were killed at some instances, right? How would you think they want to treat them? Not so well. So they were kind of caught in limbo for a while. And this really does go into the 1790s, The Senecas did attack Frankville and Hannahstown in Pennsylvania. And that's kind of the end of it. When you get to the 1781 or so, Haudenosaunee went to Fort Niagara, okay, Seneca land, western New York. And it was a refugee village. It wasn't just Senecas. There was a large number of groups of native people who were there just, our lands are burned. We need a place. We need food. If you see some of the descriptions of the kind of food they were given, it's pretty grisly, not really appealing. So they're refugees, starving, dying, disease, things that happen with warfare all over the world when humans enter warfare. So it took maybe a year and a half to get reorganized. Slowly, communities started re-emerging. Haudenosaunee started returning to some of their old communities, started planning again. But they're strongly allied to the British, at least for the Senecas. I guess they were having trouble as well, but they didn't really open the gates. They said, it's a Seneca land, fort that was allowed to be there. You can be down this little strip here, not coming in the fort. It's gold smoking, they did, but most of the Uncle Allen were there, kind of tough shape. And the Haudenosaunee conflict with Americans doesn't end until 1794, Pickering Treaty, November 11th. And like I said, the Senecas right up to a month or 2 months before that, they weren't interested in peace. Cornplanter wanted to get the warriors out and join with the Ohio Confederacy. And it was kind of close for a while. Then there was a major battle. Once that happened, the women leaders, right? The women had power in Haudenosaunee society. Women said, we're going to have peace. Cornplanter tried to actually override the women and continue warfare, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen. So there was a lot of stuff I had here that I wanted to share. I'm so sorry I couldn't share it all. I'm so glad I'm going to be pretty much on time. So we end with peace, and I brought this here. We negotiated as sovereign people. I'm going to pass it around so you can pass it to everybody. This is Muslim. So, Pickering Treaty is peace between 2 nations, or 2 entities, or 6 nations, but the Haudenosaunee. Wasn't an agreement that we lost the war. It helped define some of the land that we were able to keep. In 1797, there's a treaty that comes that takes away some of that land, and we're talking about entities like Holland Land Company, Robert Morris, and Joseph Ellicott, and that kind of stuff. But we still have our sovereignty. The U.S. Supreme Court has its thoughts about that. Every year, the United States government sends a Seneca Nation our annuity, our treaty cloth.
Yeah.
And every few years I go out and grab some. I just like to have it. I like to share it because in some of my books you'll see the treaty book I did. I'm holding it here. I don't know if I have this book, but I published another book last winter too, and I have a picture of that because it represents our sovereignty. We fight for it. We fight as hard as we can when we're capable. I'm not a leader in the community. I'm a researcher. I write books. Okay, not a leader in the community, but I have people in our community who are leaders, who are out there fighting the fight for our sovereignty, for whatever rights are out there being challenged. I know some people in Tonawanda. I don't know all the Tonawanda issues. I know Tonawanda's having a big issue now. Some developments out there. And, is it gas or is it some resource? What's the resource?
Data.
What is it?
Data, they want to put a data center out of this campus.
Well, there's a data center and then there's some resources out there, not uranium, I don't know the resource, but they're trying to.
Some precious metal.
Yeah, something out there, but I don't know a lot, I can't tell you a lot about that, but they have their own battles, and, you know, I need to share this with you very clearly, that when you say that Seneca's are keepers of the western door, today in Haudenosaunee, it's Tonawanda. Tonawanda still has their traditional leadership, you know, they still have their traditional ways. The Seneca Nation's an elective system. We went to an elective system in 1848. So essentially that means, you know, we moved out of the traditional Confederacy. You come into Salmank, you're going to see a sign that says Keeper of the Western Door, but, you know, I like to make sure that, you know, Tonawanda is Keeper of the Western Door. They're still our protectors in the Confederacy. I have 7:56. Any searing questions I cannot answer? Is this so?
Is there a dictionary? Is that a dictionary? You know, you gave us a dictionary.
Absolutely. My cousin, I published it. It's in the list. You'll see that.
It's in your book, like in your resources?
It's in my resources, and see this page here? Phyllis Bardo, Definitive Seneca. It's expensive.
Okay.
I'm warning you, it's expensive. But if you're ever at the museum, you can buy it for less.
Oh,
And there are, go to Seneca language.org, something like that. You can, for free, on the internet, see Seneca, for free. So I'm not trying to sell.
thank you.
There's a lot of resources out there. I used to be the director of the language, I was the first director of the language program in the Seneca Nation for 6 months. I'm not a speaker, but I was involved in some of that stuff, so I support that. Well, hopefully I was informative for you. I tried to give a balanced perspective, try not to just come and yell at you. You know, these are hard things to talk about. Yes?
I was gonna say, in Caledonia, yeah, okay, we get together for the Pickering, and you still come, and you still give exact stuff, right, for the piece, they give it still every year, they still do it. And when we get together, we walk down the street, and the cops have to stop everybody so we can come through. And they have a roadway with our piece on it, so that we are walking on our land to the monument. And it is so beautiful because that's the only one I know that still does every single year. And it's because the Quakers were there to help us. But I'm so grateful for that. I can't do any more, but we walk, and we walk together.
It's fantastic. You go on YouTube and look for that. You can see it. It is wonderful.
It is, you have your elders in front, and it just, well, I'm goosebummed.
I'd like to say one more thing for my
Yes.
bibliography. Look at Lawrence Hopman. If you haven't read Lawrence Hopman's book on Seneca, some of the Seneca stuff he's done, it's very, very good. He's excellent. He's incredible. He's a friend of mine. He's helped me out a lot, and we worked together on an article. But he has some great social policy resources out there, his books.
Mm-hmm.
Very productive. Lawrence Hopman, H-A-U-P-T-M-A-N. But it's in my references.
We have a couple of his books here in the gift shop, actually.
I'm
So.
surprised they haven't had him here yet, but he's older and, you know, I don't think he lectures anymore. He would have been perfect for you. I can tell you the story. The very first time I met him at the Iroquois Conference when I was in graduate school. So I gave a presentation on Willie Oak or something like that, something later. And I met Larry Hopman, and, you know, he said to me, he says, you need to read this book. I said, what book? You know, I said, because you got to learn about all this. He says, and I'm young, you know, I'm in graduate school, I'm 23 or something like that, right? Joseph Ellicott. And here I am. Here I am.
Here you are.
You know what? Donnie Hall.
Your way.
I will be happy to sign your book.
Yes, if anybody's interested in the copy, just come up to the table, we'll take care of it.
I'll get a book, I'll sign it for you.
Yes, there you go. Quick PSA, next Thursday morning for Java with Joe, Tyler Angora, our former curator, will be back to talk about the land company and the Erie Canal. And if you haven't gotten your tickets yet for the Murder Mystery on October 4th, be sure to do that. And we've got our ghost walks also if you're interested, coming up in October. Thank you, everyone.